I am very thrilled to welcome you to our plenary debate. The motion is, this House believes carbon credits can accelerate the energy transition in Asia, and this debate is to be chaired by Ecobusiness Moderator at Large, Agustin Anthuvan. Two members of the media covering this event, thank you for being here. Please note that views shared during this debate are off the record and do not represent those of the individuals or of the organization. Without further ado, Agustin, the floor is yours.
So can I invite the debate teams on the stage? For the motion will be seated on my right, and against the motion will be seated on my left. So please come on stage. So my microphone is handled by the production team, and so they'll be adjusting the volume. The teams, you can just take a seat. I just need to get this crowd warmed up. No one needs to stand because there are a couple of chairs that are empty, so please go and sit down. But your homework starts now. At the back of your nameplate, you will see this Slido. You really need to do this. Please take your phones out and scan the QR code, and the production team is going to flash the motion. And all of you are going to vote now. This is a tradition in our debate. So before the debate starts, everybody in this room needs to cast their vote. So the vote is there. Please vote for the team you think should win the plenary debate on carbon credits. Yeah, it's kind of strange, but we do this before the arguments are made. Oh my goodness, they already decided. It's like, no, but there's just one person up there. One. No, look, people, I counted before we started. I know exactly how many people are there in this room. So those of you who don't vote, you will not be able to leave this room. Yeah, the doors will automatically lock. No, I'm just joking. No, we need all of you to participate. And don't make me tell you exactly how many people there are in this room. But timing is very tight. I don't have much time to do this, so please cast the votes. And I can see, the debate teams can see as well. Right now, it's about a quarter of the room that has voted. Hint, hint, a quarter of the room has voted. The rest of you, you need to do your work because we fed you a good lunch. Hint, hint again. So take out the QR code, scan the QR code, and make a decision. Yeah, we need you to make a stand. And then the production teams will keep this. And at the end of the debate, we're going to invite all of you again to vote based on the comments that both sides have made. See whether they managed to persuade you to be for or against. Remember, Team A for the motion is on my right, and Team B against the motion is on my left. And I am about to start the debate proper. But as I can see here, we have basically now jumped miraculously to 64 people. That's a very good sign. Some of you are still not taking your phones out. So you need to embrace technology if you want to make a difference in this world. Take your phones out, scan that QR code. This is like big time, trying to persuade these people is kind of hard. Take this QR code, make your vote known. 67 is still not close to the total head count I did. We're far from the total number in this room. Everyone can vote except Augustine and the teams. Yeah, I'm not voting. I stand neutral. Can I take a seat now? Do we have permission to start? All right. So one last administrative announcement. Debating teams, because time is so tight, if for some reason your microphones don't work, just take your partner's microphones, okay? So I'm going to take a seat, everyone, and get this thing in motion. So as my dear colleague from Ecobusiness has read the preamble, there's no need for me to tell you what the debate is. But having done previous debates in Ecobusiness, I want to start by saying thank you so much, Jessica, for always keeping the debate as part of the forum. And I've done a few other debates, and I can say one thing is consistent. Both sides are taking this debate very, very seriously. They met and they have not slept. Yeah, they've been camping out somewhere in Singapore, and no, I'm just joking. But they met and they have worked out their points. So there's nothing much I can do except to run the debate according to time. So for the opening first half, each team member has 3 minutes each. At the 2-minute mark, I'll go once, and then it's end. Please don't make me do this too often because I'll shatter the glass. but I'll pass the bill to you, all right? So this is my tinkle for 2 minutes, and then it's 3 minutes is up, all right? By the way, the glasses and the waters are all yours, right? I'm just team, can we get one more glass, please, for our debate team? I'm taking one of them for myself, all right? So in the middle part, you need to work. There is one here, okay. No, then that's one here, okay. So in the middle part, you need to work. You need to key in your questions. So the organizing committee has made it such that we won't have time for microphones to go around because it's really tight. So you need to enter your questions into the Slido, and the debate teams, when the question is flashed in front of you, either you pick it or I pick it, and if, let's say, this side answers it, this side has fair voice. But the interesting thing is they only have 30 seconds to cut to the chase. 30 seconds to respond to the audience questions. Yeah, maybe we might follow that for the rest of the day. So here are my remarks. You will notice that basically when you add up all the time, both teams have approximately 10 minutes to make their case. Yeah, that's the total time. 10 minutes. Each team has 10 minutes total for the first and the second half, and 5 minutes shared time based on the questions that all of you are floating, right? Next, I've already said it to both teams in our prior meetings. Please avoid the motherhood statements, debating teams. Please avoid the motherhood statements. We had a few this morning, right? So I noticed where the laughter is coming from. I'm a former journalist, I really need to cut to the chase and get to the real story. And so thank you so much, I must say, to the moderator in the earlier session. There was one acronym, TFND, Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. That's a mouthful. So we do have a room here. Not everybody is tuned into the subject. So both teams know they're not going to have motherhood statements. They're not going to load you with acronyms. They're going to give you convincing arguments, actual case studies where possible, which is why the request to the media present in the room, this is totally off the record, all right? So this is off the books. I never met you all. So, yeah. So speak in debates. Usually it's an international format. All debates are like this. There are only two ways to do this. You speak to the intellect. You speak with an emotive pitch. It's one or the other. Or you could take both the intellectual approach and the emotive approach. And that's about it. At the end of the debate, please stand together. The official photographer will take a group photo. Hopefully you will draw closer to each other and not fight, all right? I am the reason I told the production team while I'm sitting in the middle is because I'm the divide. So for debates, you can stand if you want to. You have the mics with you. You can sit. But I recommend you sit like me. This is called engagement mode, on the edge of your chair. Yeah, don't lean back as if you're having drinks in a lounge. So sit forward. It's actually the better word is this is attack mode. So when you sit and lean forward, you can address your opposing team, but also make eye contact with the audience because they are also going to be voting on the outcome. And those are more or less the main points. The last one, it came up in the earlier session. Teams, I urge you to address the elephants in the room. Elephants in the room. So I, as a moderator, cannot say anything more, but I do urge all of you to please, go beyond your prepared statements. Go beyond you can see all your prepared statements, except Jay, he's got it all locked up. Go beyond your prepared statements because the debate requires thinking on the fly. Thinking on the fly is when you need to do the rebuttals on either sides, and I understand all four speakers have prepared for this, and we will see how you manage the 5-minute segment, right? And so they have agreed who's going to be first and who's going to be second, but I've also been very generous. I said if they decide to change last minute, they can do so, right? So you have their names, you have their profiles, and I'm going to go straight to the point and kick off my clock, activate my stopwatch. To kick off for the motion, Jay, you have 3 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Augustine. I won't stand up because I'm not sure whether I can actually
you might
fit.
hit the roof.
But I love how he put the guy from the oil and gas company first. It's like a lamb to the slaughter. So for those of you who work in sustainability, have you ever been asked what you do for sustainability? These questions usually relate to what you personally do and not your job. So do you recycle? How do you travel to work? Where do you source your electricity? It's easy to get caught up in a narrative that to be sustainable, everything you do must be perfect. Only use renewable power, only cycle to work, only use reusable shopping bags, don't fly. Now this sometimes all or nothing mentality can be overwhelming, and it can hold people back from actually making environmentally minded changes. Now, to use a quote from a former US president, and no, it's not Donald Trump, but Harry Truman, imperfect action is better than perfect action. That's to say, doing things, taking action is much better than no action. And of course, more action is better, even if it isn't perfect, or at least you're making progress. Now, I think this is apt when we talk about the use of carbon credits. Yes, quite rightly, there are quality concerns on how emission reductions or removals are measured, validated, or verified, their permanency, their additionality, their impacts, as well as the claims of companies that use them. So improvements are needed, that's for sure. Quality and trust needs to be built. And on all of these fronts, progress is actually being made to ensure that credits are high integrity, both for those that are regulated and unregulated. Yes, we should strive for perfection, but this should not stop imperfect action. So why do I think high integrity credits will accelerate the energy transition in Asia? Firstly, they increase capital flows to projects that would not get implemented, at least in the time frame that is required. Slashing greenhouse gas emissions is needed as quickly as possible, and for that, we need a colossal amount of finance. Secondly, a ton of carbon is not just a ton of carbon. If we only talk about carbon impact, we ignore the contribution to the just and fair transition. So the benefits projects can bring, such as social and economic development, ecosystem services, to name a few, can be extremely important to local communities and aligned with the host country. So these benefits should come set front and central and be valued accordingly. Third and finally, most industries today cannot completely decarbonize their operations, let alone erase their emissions from the carbon value chain. So carbon credits are not mutually exclusive from decarbonization. They're complementary, and we should do all action all the time. So in conclusion, high integrity carbon credits can be an imperfect response to a perfect storm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Round of applause. Must remind the debating speakers to keep to time, so I'm being a little bit generous. But how this works is if you take 20 seconds away from me, I take 20 seconds away from the next speaker. So that's how it works. So it's a tough call, but thank you for being the brave one to kick off the discussion. And so to make the case, this House believes that carbon credits can accelerate the energy transition. Against the motion, speaking against the motion, the floor is yours, the only lady on the stage. Leah, take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm arguing against the motion because although anecdotally we may be able to find a project in which carbon credits have helped, broadly, carbon credits have served as a mechanism for greenwashing that has actually delayed the energy transition. And I'm going to outline a couple of reasons, hopefully the elephants in the room. Firstly, is that planting a tree does not accelerate the energy transition. We have nature-based solutions, which are the most common use of carbon credits. And if we look broadly, fossil fuels are responsible for 70% of global emissions. So we have a situation where the emissions are coming from fossil fuels and the solutions are nature-based. This is not accelerating the energy transition that we need. There's a circuitous argument that governments then, with the revenue of carbon credits, can invest in renewable energy and low carbon sources, but that's every time you add in another gate, it's less likely to see that outcome. So we already heard briefly about additionality, but additionality, even when carbon credits do go to energy, it's a really perverse incentive and a moral hazard. So we have utility scale, we have a situation where utility scale renewables today are cheaper than the coal power plants and regulated fossil fuel production. So how can you justify additionality when already the market is signaling that it's cheaper? And so that's where regulatory hurdles come in. Actually, governments are incentivized to put up regulatory blockers to justify additionality. And looking at a specific case, so there's a challenge in Indonesia where there's cheaper renewable energy, but companies want to invest. In particular, a steel company has been looking to deploy renewable energy, but actually the government has had to cap solar in order to retain their coal energy online. So there's regulatory burdens that where capital is ready to go, governments just need to get out of the way and let the markets shift. But we're waiting for this carbon credit incentive to come through. Furthermore, it's really harmful because the purchaser then gets to emit 1 ton. We're not just inventing a reduction out of nowhere. Actually, by having, even if it's imperfect, we're continuing a system where there's emissions coming from it. So it's really a double blow to the climate. Any lack of integrity. And third, carbon markets are complicated. So it's no wonder that financial institutions love carbon credits because the transaction costs are so high. We need the validation because we know what happens without it. The clean development mechanism completely failed because of a glut in the market of low quality credits. But to actually have those verification steps in place, I mean, are brokers and traders and auditors really going to be the heroes of our net zero transition? We need simplified deployment of capital. Every dollar spent in the transaction costs does not go to the renewable energy transition. Thank you.
I don't know how she does it, but she's got this mental clock. She did it just exactly under 3 minutes. So I've decided to change my tinkle a little bit. So you will hear me doing, that's 2 minutes. And then if you hear that, that's for 3 minutes. But that's for the first round. And before I proceed to the 2 speakers to wrap up the opening section, a gentle reminder from our production team. So thank you, Jeremy, so much for keeping me on track. A gentle reminder to all in the audience that please note the views shared during this debate portion are off the record and do not represent those of the individual or the organization, which is why I started by being rather robust myself, right? So now it gives our 2 remaining speakers a chance to demolish the arguments presented by the other side. I do not know whether Warren will be gentle or he will just go for the kill. But Warren, you have 3 minutes to make your case. Your time starts now.
Thank you. Thank you. I am going to take you to task on a couple of things that you raised. First, I worked on CDM. We had a very large carbon finance program, and I think that the track record you'll find is that CDM was one of the reasons that renewables are so cheap today. So the ability to mobilize a lot of renewables in the 2000s was thanks to the revenue stream combined with other sources of finance that really got us going at large scale on solar and wind. Second, the Asian Development Bank loves carbon finance and carbon markets, but we don't make any money on it. So whether other financial institutions there's a financing or a financial incentive is one thing, but I think there is a recognition that there is a need for a revenue stream through carbon finance, through carbon markets, to enable developing countries that didn't have anything to do with generating the climate problem that we've got today, that are low emitting countries, that have low per capita emissions. Those countries need support to be able to move into renewables, to move into electric vehicles, e-mobility. They need that for purposes other than GHG emission reductions. They need it for clean air in the cities. They need it for energy security. And there are a number of cases that we can point to that having an additional revenue stream through carbon finance does enable them to get over the hump in terms of viability. Now, there are problems. There are challenges. Jay mentioned some of them. Carbon finance, carbon markets are essential to start getting price signals that we need to bring about the kind of behavioral changes of economic institutions and individuals. So price signal, we get a market, we'll see a price signal, we'll see an increase in the value of carbon, a ton of carbon. We need to catalyze investments, as I was talking about, in low carbon technologies. We need to enhance the bankability of mitigation projects, and this goes for both the countries that are not large emitters as well as the large emitters. An example of this is, you were mentioning Indonesia. The reason there aren't renewables in Indonesia is because the contracts for the coal-fired power are so long-term that there is no need for and no space for investing in renewables at scale. However, if we can decarbonize, if we can shut down, retire coal-fired power plants early through mechanisms such as the energy transition mechanism, and I noted you mentioned several of these exist today. I only know of one. But anyway, the energy transition mechanism is going to close coal-fired power plants starting next year, will be the first deal, in about 10 years, 12 years early. If we get carbon finance behind it, we can add 3 years to the time that we can close those plants. That's a huge amount of GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So I would say that carbon markets are essential for us going forward, particularly for the benefit of the poorest countries. Thank you.
So thank you so much for the motion. Imperfect action is better than perfect. And there are additional financial streams that are out there that will help to overcome the challenges, making the case for the motion. The final speaker for this round, the floor is yours, Alvin, arguing against the motion.
Thank you, Augustine. So this morning, Janice mentioned that we need 37 trillion of finance to get to the transition. BCG recently noted that of that amount, actually, there's 18 trillion missing. So that's the gap. So they use some very interesting words to describe this, that we need to massively accelerate to warp speed, right? So directly related to this debate topic. Now, how would we do that? I would take inspiration from something that current President Tarman mentioned at Ecosperity. He said, we do this through bold, practical action. So the key for us is, what are those bold, practical action steps to find? Taking into account the fact that we have limited time, limited bandwidth, limited money to solve a colossal problem, as Jay put it. Carbon credits is not the solution for that. So what is? Let's talk about that. So firstly, let's look at Asia in the context of the problem. So the largest future emitters, based on the BCG report, would be China, India, US, and the EU. So that's more than 60% of future emissions for the next 20 years. It's pretty clear that policy, tax, and other traditional measures would address that in those 4 cases. So that leaves about 30% of emissions from the rest of the world, Asia only being a portion of that. That being said, that's still a big number. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, perhaps single-digit trillion dollars to address the problem in Asia. That's a huge amount. The carbon markets have never delivered at that scale. So if we're looking for bold, practical action, it's not carbon credits. So what are those 3? What are the things that will deliver that result? It was discussed this morning, actually. Public grants, investments, and also policy. I'll talk about all 3 of these. Desmond Quek mentioned about public sector grants. We need those in size, obviously. So we're going to spend our time and effort to find an imperfect but big solution. I'd rather spend the time on finding those grants rather than carbon credits. Secondly, investments. The grants will unlock investments. Now, in the case of investments, we already have bonds and loans that, as a market, of course, are over $100 trillion. But it's notable that in the sustainable finance space alone, that's a $1 trillion solution that already exists today. We should use it. The ASEAN taxonomy already supports that. That was discussed this morning. And also, I would note that some of the financing that's already been presented or given before are from Chinese lenders. Well, it was proposed by Professor Netapil of Fudan that there could be debt for climate swaps driven by Chinese financial institutions. That is a very large potential solution. There are 29 plants funded by China in Indonesia, 14 in Vietnam. We can tackle those at scale. Finally, policy. We need to enable all these grants, and we need to have a carbon tax in developed markets to pay for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's interesting, 2 presidents have made it into today's debate. Former US president and current Singapore president, so that's very nice. A gentle reminder to the production team, I'm waving at you. Please remember to do a screenshot of the opening vote. Remember the opening vote? We need to do a comparison. So don't lose the opening vote numbers, production team. And then when I call up the poll, we'll see the numbers and see how far they've changed, all right? So reminder to the production team back there. Now starts the work. Please take out your Slido QR code and enter the question that you have for debating teams. You can channel your question to a particular side. Reminder for those of you who join in, this is for the motion, and this is the against the motion. And so I'll just give you a quick 1 minute, and then as soon as the production team flashes the questions up here on stage, we'll take them on, all right? But a gentle reminder, let's not lose track. The motion is, this House believes that carbon credits can accelerate, emphasis can accelerate the energy transition in Asia. So we are limiting our debate, and rightfully so, to a very large continent called Asia, where some of the major players who can obviously make a difference are present. All right? Do we have a question from the floor? Yeah. So now you know you have to work for your lunch. Never came free. All right, so let's take it off. Debating teams, you know how this works. Rapid fire, you have 30 seconds, and without fail, without even me tinkling the glass, if I give for the motion a chance, the against the motion responds. And remember, the more arguments you make for either side, the more you're able to convince the audience out there. I'm going to basically just take, the stopwatch is kind of blocking my view, so I'm going to stand up. I'm going to take the one that's got the least votes. To the second speaker of the opposition, I believe you, sir, the solutions you mentioned, can't they exist together with carbon credits? Your 30 seconds begins now.
Yes, the solutions can exist together with carbon credits. But as I mentioned in the remarks, we have limited time and bandwidth. Let's focus those on the solution that will move the needle the most. I would argue that's public sector grants, investments, and policy.
Over to this side.
As I said before, I'm all about action. We should do all the things that we have and we are capable of doing right now because we need to accelerate things very quickly. So grants, yes, but carbon credits, yes. Channels financing to where it needs to be. So both things can be complementary.
Well, it sounds like a marriage proposal. So it's like, okay, the hand is coming across halfway. That's why I sit in the middle. Grants, yes, but let's talk, guys and girls. All right, but let's take the next one. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to go backwards. You know, I like to give the small voices in the room a chance. 2 people have voted for this. How can carbon credit accelerate Singapore's energy transition? Warren, over to you.
Well, that's a great question. 2 months ago, the Energy Market Authority here in Singapore signed an MOU with ADB for us to help countries to actually import renewable energy to Singapore. If we had a carbon market, right now we're talking about Indonesia and Cambodia, and there will be others. If we had a carbon market, we'd be able to accelerate that because of the revenue streams that they would be able to see coming in from the carbon credits. So yes, it could.
Well done, Warren. Within 30 seconds, over to the side, your voice.
So if we're talking about the corporate action, actually, the opportunity to purchase carbon markets, which can be something totally unrelated to what a company's needs for its decarbonization, is going to put Singapore at a disadvantage in the net zero transition, because already it's moving. I mean, we're seeing science-based targets capping carbon credits until the long-term targets. We're seeing the EU banning products that are using carbon credits towards targets. So actually, the inertia that carbon offsets creates, compared to, like the fact that we think about net zero as only carbon credits is a problem.
All right, your time's up. Yeah, well done. You made your case. Production team, we can move the carbon credits. Okay, that's one at the bottom. There, those that are answered can move it out of the way, please. Carbon credits shouldn't exist if it only allows for more greenwash. And then the question disappeared. You know, production team, you've got to manage this, otherwise I can't keep track. But I'm going to give this time over to for the motion. Can you respond, please?
I think this is a very good question. It's something that's debated a lot in the media at the moment. But essentially, if you look at the companies that are using carbon credits at the moment, they do 80% more decarbonization than those that don't. So that doesn't really tend to say that they are greenwashing.
So it's not greenwashing.
I'm not saying individual cases, but I'm saying they do more decarbonization by buying carbon credits than they would do without.
All right, I used up his 30 seconds to just put him on the spot. Over to this side, you have 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I would like to remind everyone that when you purchase 1 ton of carbon credit, you have emitted 1 ton. We're not talking about this in a this is not a pure good. If I'm buying a car, it allows me to continue emitting. And greenwashing, the definition, is making claims that aren't substantiated, and carbon credits do not have the transparency to substantiate claims.
All right, I'm going to move up the ladder now, production team. The one that's got 4 votes. Do you still support or oppose carbon credits for transition financing if they are part of a voluntary market, which are the VCMs? Warren, over to you.
Well, yes. If you look at the experience of the Clean Development Mechanism, which had the same kinds of challenges, those were overcome by hard work and better regulation. That's what's needed whether we have voluntary market or a regulated market. So yes, the revenue streams that carbon finance generates for investments in low carbon in all the Asian developing countries is more than justification for the low risks that overall we face with greenwashing. So yes.
Thank you. Over to you. That was perfect. 30 seconds. Over to this side.
So Warren mentioned that it's kind of like prices will fix themselves, right? It's a market. But the current price of voluntary carbon markets is how much? $3 on average. $3 per ton of carbon. And so when you're looking to decarbonize and your baseline is I can just offset for $3 per ton, it is creating inertia. And so there's something fundamentally flawed about the carbon markets as a go-to. Even SGX's guidance is first you reduce and you avoid and you make efficient and you substitute and as a last resort offset. So they're creating a lot of inertia in the system.
Good. It's good that you keep it under 30 seconds. I'm probably going to have 2 more questions. The production team, hold it on the green icon with the one that's got Nick on it. The expectation of carbon credits drove the development of methodologies to reduce emissions. If no carbon credits, who will take the risk to finance this? For the motion?
I totally agree there. I mean, if we go back to the Clean Development Mechanism again, I was involved in developing methodologies in and around methane reduction. And they were incentivized by the Clean Development Mechanism. They wouldn't have been developed otherwise. And they're now being used by companies when they measure and decarbonize. So absolutely, this will happen. And it allows finance to come in and take that risk with an added incentive there.
All right. Very good. Under 30 seconds. Against the motion?
So another way to finance emission reductions is to apply a carbon tax. So if you know that you will be penalized with a tax, as a rational actor, corporations, they will find ways to cut emissions to avoid paying that tax. You don't need carbon credits for that.
All right, production team. Can we scroll the questions? I want to take now the question that got the highest votes. I mean, to be fair to the room here and the audience, can we scroll up and then you give me the one that got the highest votes? Yeah, I always keep the production team fully alert. Can we scroll up, please? There were questions that received beyond 6, 7 votes. Further up, please. Can we scroll up? Last call. Are we able to get the questions? Give me a signal. Yes, I don't see it on my plasma. None of us see it. We only see the one which got three votes. I think you need to scroll it so that the question that had the highest votes. Ball is in your court, guys. And my clock is ticking. Stress. Okay, if that's what I see, so both teams for and against the motion. okay, let's be fair. This has got a couple of votes here. You can read it for yourselves. For the against the motion team, your arguments suggest credits are not what's hindering the acceleration. It's lack of regulation and presence of middlemen, isn't it? 30 seconds. Please kick off.
So it is. So we could spend 50 years, 100 years trying to get the regulations right. I mean, the financial system took centuries to get the regulations right. Frankly, we don't have the time. In 7 years, we have to halve global emissions. So let us just move forward with the regulations that are going to matter, carbon tax, mandatory disclosures across supply chains. These are the things that will actually drive the ball. So let's put our eggs in the basket that we know will deliver outcome.
Thank you. And this side, you have a chance to respond.
I think if you look at the carbon tax, and we're in a place where we have one, it's very clear that to make that work and to make it not impose too much on industry, that you have an opportunity to bring in credits from other countries. And this is under Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. So it allows flexibility. It's only 5% of the tax. So it is a small amount, but it allows flexibility and it pursues finance in those other countries, particularly in the region.
Well done. And we'll have to move on. It's interesting. Can we give them a round of applause because they really did well? I'm sure none of you there want to be sitting up here doing rapid fire and thinking on the fly. And they never know who is Augustine going to throw the question to, right? I mean, none of this was planned. And so well done. Well done, production team. We can lose the questions. And a gentle reminder, please keep the screenshot of the opening vote. That's very important. We want to see how much of the needle both teams have moved when we do the second vote, all right? We'll need that. We'll need the opening vote numbers, and then we'll vote again. Now is the reverse order, and it gets tighter also because it's part of the debate format. We're going to kick off on this side. Each speaker has 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. So you notice in the opening, for the motion kicked off, and so for the reverse order, against the motion kicked off. And you notice interesting strategies that both teams have adopted. One side is speaking across to try and convince the team, while another speaker is looking at you, trying to get you to vote for them. And likewise, the team on this side is also doing the same strategy. But at the end of the day, not only do they have to convince each other, they need to convince you, because you, the audience, will have to vote on the motion. So once again, to recap the motion, this House believes that carbon credits can accelerate the energy transition in Asia. To argue against the motion, Leah, you have the floor. 2 minutes.
So it's not what's happening in Asia that's accelerating the energy transition. It's what's happening globally that's forcing the energy transition to happen to remain competitive. And so kind of increasingly the public and the private disclosures are looking at supply chain and emission reduction. We're seeing the EU disclosures kind of across the supply chain. The US is currently debating a new supply chain movement. And so it's about emissions removals within the value chain, and value chain action is how we're going to drive outcomes. We saw, for example, the Elon Musk and electric vehicles did not use carbon credits to achieve that outcome. A lot of the solar, while may have worked in certain situations, globally, we're seeing that carbon credits have really created a valve to take the pressure off of a meaningful transition. And so things that will work, regulations enabling the transition, investors setting expectations for portfolio companies to set science-based targets. And in Southeast Asia, if we sell the right to the decarbonization credit, the carbon credit, then we're no longer able to claim it as a reduction, right? So that's going to hamper the competitiveness in this new net zero world where there's radical transparency of emissions across the supply chain.
You had 30 seconds.
I gave him my
left,
30 seconds.
which I'm going to transfer to Elvin to be fair. But she made the case in 90 seconds. Thank you so much. Now to argue for the motion, Jay, you have the floor. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think what we've heard today is we all need to accelerate very quickly, and we need to mobilize a lot of finance. I do believe that carbon credits has a role in that, along with a lot of other things. So concessional grants, normal project finance, all of these things need to be mobilized quickly. But in some cases, in some countries, there's a gap, right? New technologies that come on, electric vehicles can be developed with subsidies in the US, but they can't necessarily be done in other countries. And this is where carbon finance comes from, and this is where the use of carbon credits is. And then we've got to remember that we're talking about a just and fair transition. So how it affects people, how it affects communities is really important. And the additional benefits that can be designed into projects, into carbon credit projects, and they can be valued very highly, these are really important. So I think the mention of a low price of carbon is very fair. $3 is not enough. It needs to be much more. And it needs to show what other benefits, other than just carbon emission reductions or removals, are being done. So what its contribution to that country and community is. Thanks.
It's interesting. Both teams did it in 90 seconds, so I'll transfer the 30 seconds over to you, Warren, and you can have it in your closing arguments. We have reached the most important stage in our debate. Appeal to your intellect, appeal to your emotions. Or will it be a combination of both? And now giving the final voice for against the motion, the floor is yours, Alvin.
Thanks, Augustine. So let's recall the goal, as BCG very eloquently stated: massive acceleration, warp speed. And we've talked about what's going to get us there. The grants, the investments, and the policy. I do want to add to Leah's point on policy, that if you have carbon tax in the developed markets, companies will act rationally. They all have supply chains in Southeast Asia. They will figure out how to work with those partners to get them decarbonized. All of that is done through policy and taxation. Credits aren't needed for that. But let's also address the arguments for the team for credits. Well, we're talking about trying to solve a problem that's hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars. How big is the VCM today? 2 billion, if we're lucky. So yes, we could spend a whole bunch of time trying to make that work. It is a rounding error. We have to get the core solutions working, because those will mobilize hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars. This was alluded to by Prime Minister Lee at the G20 recently. What did he talk about? He talked about the fact that Singapore is exploring a finance model that will pull together at scale green transition finance, public, private, philanthropic sectors. We heard about the philanthropic part this morning from Desmond Quick. And Singapore's keen to partner others to make that happen. So this was addressed by the Prime Minister. And I would add to that, he also said something very interesting later on. He applauded India, as the current G20 president, for supporting a study on how to reform and improve multilateral development banks. Why? Because they provide a crucial part of that equation, and they need to take more risk, and we need to raise the amount of general capital that they have. Why is that important? Leverage. Every dollar that goes into MDB will bring in $7 of finance from the public sector and $8 of finance from the private sector. Huge multiplier effect. We have to make that happen. So it's not about spending a whole bunch of time maybe nudging the needle a little bit with carbon credits. It's about taking all the energy that we have, stepping on the accelerator, and following what PM Lee has already identified at the G20. Thank you very much.
Warren, take it home for us. Closing arguments.
Thank you. I think the main message is that it's not an either-or. For us to make the transition to a net zero world and to assist those communities that are most vulnerable to climate impacts requires every tool and every dollar that we can get to the table. So it's not whether you're going to have a carbon tax or a carbon market. We need them both. But we know that carbon taxes are much more politically difficult to achieve in many parts of the world. My country, forget it. The issue of small size today, that's today. If we don't work on this, if we don't clean up the regulations and improve the monitoring and evaluation so that we don't have greenwashing, then there isn't going to be a market. So yes, today's market is trivial, but it has huge potential to get very, very large and have a significant impact together with the grant resources, together with MDB financing, together with philanthropic money, and all the other sources that private sector that can be mobilized from the private sector. The carbon markets can be very instrumental in getting projects over the hump because of that revenue stream. One of our objectives is to see how we can actually fast forward payments so that you can actually get credit ahead of time and have that financing for the investor up front instead of just be a revenue stream. We think that'll have a huge impact, but if we don't have a carbon market and a price on carbon, then it's not going to happen. So it's not an either or. We need to mobilize every type of and source of finance that we can and get the policies right, get the regulations right, and then make the changes that are needed across the globe. Thank you.
Well done. Round of applause for both teams. They planned the argument so well, and both teams did not use the extra 30 seconds. I didn't even have to do the tinkle. And so remember, this session is off the record because a lot of things that we shared, myself personally, but we wanted this to be a robust discussion. And once again, it's a wonderful part of the whole eco-business program to have this chance to really get all of you engaged. And before you jump to the poll, because you've already started voting, I can see some of you, the numbers are shifting already. But before you do that, let's have a cooling 30 seconds. Yeah, this cooling period is a very Singapore thing. It's like, just pull back a little bit. You've heard arguments on both sides. And as a moderator, I've been very careful not even to nod my head for or against of any arguments that are being made. But we must admit both sides did make some very convincing positions. And I hesitate to even echo. Do you notice as a moderator, I did not echo either side because I didn't want to influence you. Take those remaining 20 seconds and cast your votes now. You are all asked to decide, when we came into this house, to decide whether it is possible to accelerate. And did one side or the other make the case? Who managed to convince you and managed to move the needle? We are now at the tail end of our session and the time allocated. And before I hand over the floor back to the MC, a gentle reminder, we'll take a group photo for all of you on stage, all right? So you may now scan your QR code and please address the question. This House, well, the motion, this House believes that carbon credits can accelerate the energy transition in Asia. Arguing for the motion, Jay Marapan and Warren Evans. And arguing against the motion, Leah Nicholson and Alvin Lee. Who managed to persuade you? Please vote now. I have to stand up for this because earlier we had 64 people in the House who voted, and right now, well, we have got more people participating. We're up to 68 people. That's nice, right? Remember, we'll compare. So the bracket, the words that you see in bracket is the after, and I wrote down the numbers for the before, and then we'll do a comparison. 70 people. I feel like this is an auction. Can I see 80? Can I see 80? Can someone please do a head count here? Like, what numbers do we finally have? Can somebody do a head count? It's like, oh gosh, my wish might come true. We're going to hit 80 people. Yes? One more? Yes, we hit 80. Okay, can I see 90? Nah, I'm just being cheeky. We have to be professional. I need to hand over the floor to the next session. And so, final chance to bring your numbers in. Right? Thank you so much, production team. Let me tell you, before the debate started, 53% for the motion, 47% against the motion. I would say it's a pretty close position when we started off. Listening to both sides making their case, we can see now, I'm reading what I see here on the screen, Team B, against the motion, has managed to persuade quite a number of you in the hall, and if the numbers keep going up, Can I see 100 people voting? Seriously. Can I see 100 and then my heart is at ease, and then I'm sure even Jessica will be happy that 100 people voted. Finally we get more people involved, because you're going to set the future. But I can see the numbers clearly speaking, unless a miracle happens within the next few seconds. Team B against the motion has secured 58% of the vote, and Team A, you gave it a good fight for the motion, you secured 42% of the vote. Remember what we started with and what we ended with. I want to quote on this side of the House, it has to be a handshake, all hands on deck, and all approaches have to work. Yeah, it's moving, but I don't think yeah, we hit 100, I know my heart is at ease. But I no disrespect to the only lady on the panel there, but I like this quote from Melvin. We need to have massive acceleration. We need warp speed. You and I are Star Trek fans. So I don't know about you people. I've got 3 grown-up kids. If I ever live to 2050, that's a miracle of miracles. Please, people in the hall, make this happen. This is off the record. So next week, I travel to the Asian Development Bank for a conference in Manila. It's a country that I lived and grew up and studied in. So you heard the morning passionate speech. Believe me, they deal with climate. They live it day in and day out. The action needs to start now. It has been an honor and a privilege to moderate this debate. Please give a round of applause for both teams. Jay. Well done, Jay.